August 27th, we can start this meeting. So I can call this meeting to order and ask for roll.
Sorry. Cindy Toll.
Here.
Vicki Yates.
Here.
Derek Menson.
Here.
Bob Seward.
Here.
Chair McLaughlin.
Here, ladies.
Oh, Christina Robertson, Gardner staff.
Laura Turway, staff.
We have Laura tonight.
And we
That's a
have
treat.
one member here who'd like to do public comments for items not on the record.
Yes, so that was calling to order, then we skipped 2, and we're going to comments number 3 right now. So I have a comment form. So if you'd like to come forward and state your name and your address and tell us what's on your mind.
Very kind to use that word.
Which one?
I just want to make sure that it's
Yeah.
plugged in.
We'll see in a minute here, right?
My name's Bob Mahoney. I live at 240 Park Drive, Oregon City. And it seems like everybody is getting their oar in the water, no pun intended, on the Legacy project. And I just saw that you were meeting tonight, and I just thought I'd come down and share a few ideas that I have with you. This piece of property, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't belong to anybody. Oregon City, Clackamas County, State of Oregon, United States. It belongs to history. This is a historical site, and that property is a moving target. It's stationary, but what ends up on that piece of property is going to be it can either be problematical or it can be as we wish. If it's as we wish, we consider ourselves to be very lucky. I look at this piece of property as the potential of being an international point of destination. 3 things in this country happened that formed this country, and one was the Louisiana Purchase that we all learned in the, what was it, the 1st or 2nd grade. The Oregon Territory and Lewis and Clark. All those things formed what we know as Oregon and the Oregon Territory and the area in which we live. This truly is a historical site. But it truly is, like I say, it's a moving target because the economy in this country is also a moving target, and that's going to be the factor that's either going to allow it to develop in a fairly speedy way, or it's going to drag on forever, because the financial aspect of it is that people are going to have to get loans to develop the property if we have it to be a commercial, mixed-use, industrial under private ownership and public ownership. My own particular position on it is because of the nature of it, it really does belong to the public. The collateral economic impact that would have as a point of destination with a 5-star hotel and a world-class museum and overlooking the falls and a place where people could congregate on a regular basis for events and things like that would be that it would be regional in nature because you'd have people coming up the river on tour vessels. You'd have people coming on tour buses from the Portland International Airport. You'd have TriMet coming out. You'd have water activity and things of that nature. And therein probably lies the biggest problem of all, because if it is as successful as we hope it to be, the traffic factor is going to be one where ODOT is really going to have to spend a lot of money to make it safe and efficient. But you're talking at least 250,000 people annually visiting that site if it were just public. But I think the nature of that site, the nature of the whole problem, is to put people on the site. People will bring commerce. People will bring money that they're going to spend in Oregon City, and that'll just project right up Main Street and change the whole character of downtown Oregon City if we are as successful as we hope to be. And there's the dilemma, how to deal with success, that kind of thing. But what I wanted to share with you was just what I said. The development of that piece of property being a moving target, it'll probably extend out 10, 15 years before it finally develops. And there'll be a change of ownership. I anticipate several factors over it's going to be expensive to own that piece of property. But anyway, you'll get a chance, I'm sure, by your competent staff here to review things from their point of view, their perspective, and the development of or the consultant's approach to it. And it's going to be, the train's left the station. It's going to be a really interesting ride. So,
Well, thanks for your time.
well,
Appreciate it.
yeah, it'll come before us too. I happen to have the privilege of serving on the planning commission, and I don't want to speak out of turn or be premature, but I see in the newspaper and on TV that other people have been talking about it, and I don't want to cross swords with anybody, but I think before this is developed, I think there'll be a lot of sword crossing and a lot of words spoken, and why did I say that, and why did he say that, and he said, she said, and all that kind of stuff. But just, I think if everybody steps back, takes a deep breath, we'll all work together and get her done. Okay?
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming.
You betcha. My problem. I'm going to get to go home now. Any of you people were in the Navy? I went real slow so you could keep up. But yeah, thank goodness. Okay, thank you, folks.
Have a good evening.
You bet. I'm going to go home and watch the Kardashians.
Sounds like a classy Marine.
There you go.
Is that his red bag?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay,
That's
so
his hat.
so the next thing is the Oregon City sign-up code thingamajig. That's
Yes.
probably why Laura's here.
I'm going to pass this over to Laura Truway, who's going to be making a presentation this evening about the citywide sign code update, and she's the project manager for this process. And I'm going to pass over to her, and a lot of it is
Oh, there you go.
her providing information to the Historic Review Board, and then her getting comments from you about kind of your direction and your kind of lens that you see this through this process.
Thank you.
We'll just limit you to 3 minutes.
I'll talk really fast. Again, Laura Turway, planner of the city. I'm just here to talk to you about our sign code update. It was one of the City Commission goals for 2013 to look at our sign regulations for both private property as well as signs in the right-of-way and figure out if we're on mark. We know that there's a wide variety of signage that we could allow, big signs or little signs, and when you're going through different jurisdictions like Las Vegas or Times Square, signage adds to that character of a neighborhood. Or conversely, if you're going through Sisters or Leavenworth, it also adds differently to the character of those areas. So in Oregon City, is our signage regulations appropriate or not appropriate? Do they need to be changed in any way? So we're going through a year-long process to figure that out. We have set up a community advisory team, and they're going to meet 4 times and put together a package of sign regulations, and they will recommend those changes to staff, and staff will be the ones writing the codes and coming back through the legislative process with sign code changes.
When did you start?
Well, I mean, we signed a contract before, but we started the website on July 1st, 4th of July-ish, around there. I've been to, this is meeting number 14 so far. So we've been trying to get the word out about what we're doing, and then also recruit members for the CAT team, which is already sealed. So I'm here because I wanted to get your opinion on signage with a historic lens. So do you think our sign regulations are okay for historic areas? Not okay? Is the process okay? Is there something that we need to change, not change? And then everything you tell me, I'm going to write down and give it to the CAT team, the Citizen Advisory Team, and then they'll take that into advisement. And then also, we wanted you to attend, someone from HRB or Christina, to attend one of our meetings when we actually talk about options for signage and what we should tweak or not tweak.
Well,
So,
I guess my question is, as far as our board, is the main area for signage like going up Malala through the district,
Through 7th.
or 7th, I should say, kind of, or and then going down Washington, I guess, kind of.
so right now we have sign regulations based off the zoning designations, so that'll tell you how big, and then you know that you have a historic overlay, and so if it's in McLaughlin, if it's designated it will have to go through a review. If it's not designated, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So Christina will look at it for natural materials and I think size. And then if it's real big or something, it would go towards you. Is that an okay process or not okay? There's no thought that it should change unless you think it should change, or we're not thinking that we'll open up 1740 or any of the regulations, unless you want us to, or what sort of where, how are things? Are things okay? One of the questions is like, should McLaughlin itself have a separate sign regulation? So not under Historic Review Board, but do they need different regulations? For example, everything within a specific area would have to be wood or natural materials or something. That would go in through our sign code, not through HRB code. So do we need different sign regulations in different parts of the city?
Or should
What
it
are your
just say
thoughts?
status quo?
Yeah, what do you think?
The less involvement by this board, the better.
I'm writing that down.
The signs on the street in the McLaughlin neighborhood are already different because they have John McLaughlin's little head on there.
I think she's talking more like commercial.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, but I think that that's different enough
Yeah.
to keep the neighborhood, different.
And Main Street has nothing to do with us, right? So
Yeah.
it's really the two kind of.
Yeah.
And then if there's like architects doing their thing or lawyers doing their thing and they want to shingle out.
Yeah. Where this comes into play in a lot of cases, size, limitations, and to some extent style. The one thing I would say is in McLaughlin District, I'd prefer not to see the TV style signage.
Oh.
Yeah.
What-
Are you
what
guys
is that?
thinking about that?
I
TV
hope-
style?
No,
What do you
I
mean
don't.
TV style?
Where
It's like a big screen.
Yeah.
Oh, you
and
mean the
it-
moving screen?
Yeah, moving
Yeah,
bright
where-
Are you
color.
thinking of doing that for your office?
absolutely not.
I think those are, in places I've been before, those have been limited due to safety concerns
Well,
because
they're
they
all
move
along
and they distract
99E
people.
now.
That's true in
Yeah.
our
What about
case as
growing
well.
Yeah.
signs?
Okay.
Would that be an issue?
What?
What kind?
Throwing
Growing
signs.
signs? Plant
Such
signs?
That's art.
That's
not
another
signs.
question. What's the definition of a
Yes,
sign?
yeah.
What's the
is a
definition
sign?
of a sign? Could it be something growing, and is that applicable in a historic district, I guess?
I
And
don't
we're all
think that's something
content
we want to
neutral.
regulate.
as well.
Absolutely not.
No.
I have a couple of comments.
Yes.
First, I want to really applaud the city for taking such a open, proactive approach and trying to get citizen involvement and chamber involvement. Everyone, I think sign code changes is one of, if not the most potentially contentious issue that a city can go through, and I think the city is going about it the right way. My substantive comment is last year when we were working on the Willamette Falls Heritage Festival, I forget the exact name of what it was called. I was on the committee that was doing the signs and the trolley, whatever it was.
Advertisement?
The trolley stops. And we were trying to figure out what kind of signs, temporary signs, we should put up at each individual historic stop. So my job was to go around to the 20 or 30 different places in Oregon City and West Linn and take photographs of the existing signs. As a result of that, we learned a bunch of things. First, we decided we didn't really need signs because there were plenty of signs on the historic places already. But secondly, we decided that the signs were so inconsistent. There was just a mishmash of different signs, and a lot of them were repetitious. That was my personal opinion anyway. And I would like to, of course, not require new signs in the historic district. But if we do have new signs or changing signs, that we have for the historic properties, that we have a consistency so everything looks relatively the same. And there is a thread of that going through already. But if you go, for instance, to the McLaughlin House or the Barclay House, there's 4 or 5 different signs, and they're all different types and styles. And it's very busy and not very attractive. As for signs of commercial commercial businesses or private dwellings or things like that in the historic district, I don't think we should really regulate it except for TV signs or things that would just be unlawful anyway.
General code would sort of
Yeah,
take
general
care of it
code
anyway.
would take care of it.
I would like to make a suggestion about font. If you're going to, just try to decide on what kind of font to use in signs, you might take your cue from the historic signs on the houses, because they all seem to use the same font. And if we're going to do it throughout the city, just because these are historic homes, it shouldn't matter. Just use the same font throughout the city.
Now, Vicki and Cindy, I've got a question for you too. When you're discussing specifically your comment, Cindy, are you referring to the city's signage for their locations, or is
Yes.
that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, not the individual placards on the houses?
Well, no, I'm saying that they could take their cue from those placards for the fonts, and I think that it would just get some uniformity going
Okay.
throughout the city.
I can certainly pass that comment along. One thing that I didn't mention previously is that, so we have lawyers involved in this project, obviously, and one thing that we're really careful of is to talk about the content of a sign. We want to make sure that we can talk about material, height, location, placement, how many signs, but just not the content of what it says. So
Right. Because that's free speech.
Right.
that's the only thing that's sort of hands off. Another thing that we'll be thinking about is we don't really have any regulations for signs in the right of way. So on the sidewalk, like those A-frame signs. So what should our regulations be? We have them a lot on Main Street, but on 7th too. How often? What should they material?
We
that type
have
of
regulations for temporary signs. Do those not fall under temporary signage?
That is correct. They do not, because our
Okay.
sign code only applies to signs on private property. We do not have any regulations for signs within the right of way at all.
There should
I would be
some.
careful with limiting the amount of time a temporary sign would be out. Temporary signs are very tricky because every business wants them out there to attract attention, and sometimes they stay out there too long. With A-frame signs, my opinion is that a restaurant will put it out through a very long season, and so if you limit it to 30 days, it's just not going to be practical. And I would like this to be reasonable. That is kind of my thought. But you own a restaurant.
Yeah,
too.
I agree. I think temporary signs shouldn't be particularly limited, especially since there's a lot of street trees that block signs on buildings, and the temporary signs are really important to have.
When does a temporary
What?
sign become a permanent sign?
Well,
When
it's
it's
moved
fixed.
in and out.
When it's fixed?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these would not be
Sometimes,
fixed signs.
don't they put like chalk? People draw up with chalk on these signs, and they change what's on the sign a
Yes.
lot. And they can't have those out when it's raining, so they have to pull them in
Well, they can, because they can be permanent.
with the
what-
chalk.
Banners, I think, are probably the most contentious.
I just
because
thought
those
of
can
banners
still-
because I know there's a house on Malala and Jackson. It's like a mortgage place, and they have those banners that you make, and every time I see that, I think, man, that's tacky.
Thumbs down on banners.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in
they're
the
kinda-
district. Yeah, absolutely.
The worst signs are the signs on that are tacked up on telephone poles for yard sales that come up and don't come down, and
That's kind of,
that kind of
that's
thing.
code enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not supposed to be there.
PAG says no signs on their telephone poles at all, but no one abides by that. And it kind of gives it a character.
So are we okay with how our sign regulations are in historic districts? It basically just whatever our generic code is, unless it's in Kenema or a historic designated home? And that's
Sure.
where we get into the realm where Christina reviews it. If it's
Well, it sounds like you
True.
need to
Or
do
you-
something about temporary signs.
okay.
Banners in the historic district. No banners.
Yeah. And to clarify, I don't think we have a problem with the temporary signs other than banners.
but there are
No, but
some
there's no
banners
regulations.
that are put up for different art fairs.
Well, that's different.
Those-
Right. So a limited
A ba-
duration on those, but a temporary banner that goes up for
For a
2
commercial
years.
office or
I see.
a
They don't
business.
look-
You mean like now open, grand opening?
We're s-
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's some of the other meetings we're going to. So currently our code is that we don't allow any banners at all. You may see a couple out there.
Yeah, there are. There are.
But we're starting to hear from the groups that we're going to that maybe banners are appropriate for a certain amount of time. People have thrown out like 30 days, and that's it. Is that something that is appropriate in a historic district, or we're saying not in?
I would say no. But that's me. Someone else could say something else.
Is it mixed? Maybe some,
No.
maybe not? No?
I would say
Okay.
One loophole that I've seen in other places for banners and signs is folks sometimes put the banners inside their windows and stretch them out, and that's often a loophole that should be taken care of so people can't do that. They look terrible.
It's true in our case, we don't regulate signs on the inside of windows unless they're like flashing lights that are distracting to drivers or something.
Yeah. I don't know that I would regulate signs inside buildings.
We'll put.
I agree. I don't like them. I just don't think we should regulate them.
Just to jump in here, just in my education for Main Street, some main streets have been worked with their business owners to make sure that a certain percentage of their windows are transparent, because kind of some main streets have having problems because they put so much stuff up in the windows you can't see inside, and it's not an inviting, welcoming place. So some have looked into kind of that regulation of, we're not going to tell you can't put a banner behind your window, but you have to keep an X amount of your window open to see through. I mean, there's some ways of looking at it that way, so you're not getting into kind of the hard part of enforcing that. But you do something opposite of, like, we don't care what you put behind your window, but you have to keep a certain amount at pedestrian level, and you can always look through to keep it, open.
All right. Any other suggestions or comments you want me to forward on to our CAT team?
This really isn't signs, it's more windows than signs, but there are quite a number of businesses in town that have put in new windows that you can't really see through. I think it's really bad for business if you can't see into a business. And I just think it would be good if, when they come to planning, if we could educate them that isn't inviting and doesn't work really well.
We do have code on that now.
You do?
After this
Yeah.
building was built.
Yeah, this was a perfect
okay.
example of, we do have a code of, we have an opacity rating, and if your building's coming in and that gets linked for us to review, we do review the opacity rating. There may be windows that are switched out without building permits or gone through the process, but we do have a code in place for that purpose.
Does this building conform?
No, this was
It
one
did
of
the time it was built.
It did the time it was built, and the code was changed after
Okay.
this building.
I will say that some types of organizations require mirrored windows for security reasons.
That's true.
And a little aside, but if for some reason you were a business and you could have a compelling reason why, and you had a modification, we have a process to go through, but not as a default.
Perfect.
All right, so a little bit more about the process. We have a website, ocsigncode.org. Please log on, add any comments. There's a get involved. We're posting all of our meetings we're going to, any comments. All our documentation is going to be posted here. We know that this project is only good if we get a lot of people involved throughout the entire process. We have a wide range of opinions the entire time. So we're putting everything that we're doing online for everyone to look at and comment on as well. And our CAT team will meet 4 times through December, September through December, to come up with their formal options for staff for code. Then we're going to come back. We'll probably come before you again when we get more towards the end of the process. And then we'll go through a legislative process with Planning Commission, City Commission approval as well.
How many meetings will you have in total?
The CAT team is meeting 4 times. We're going around to as many groups as we can to drum up interest and get public opinion. So we've been this is number 14
How many more
in
do
the
you
last
have in the
month.
first round?
What's that?
How many more do you have in the first round?
Well, let's see. We have that many more.
Laura,
so far.
what's prompting this?
City Commission, one of their top goals of 2013. Other than that, I'm not really sure what the more specifics. We haven't had a major update to our sign code in the past 20 years. We've done a little tweak here and there. But
So it's overdue.
our complaints have been up, our actual enforcement's gone away, so we really just put you on a list. So part of this, we want to figure out how to come up with this sustainable enforcement program.
Who enforces it? Is it code enforcement?
Code enforcement planning sort of like gets passed back. I mean, if it's easy, they'll send letters. If not, it goes to us. And
I have one more request. I am the chamber representative on this historical review board. So sometimes because legislation in the city moves quickly, we hear about things, and before we know it, there's a meeting 4 days later, and you don't have really enough time to actively and meaningfully participate. And this is such an important issue to business. I'd request that when the final draft comes out, that the chamber have, I'd say, at least 30 days to be able to review that, have the board meet, have subcommittees, even 6 weeks or so would be really appreciated.
I think we're going to come out with an initial draft around January, and I'm guessing it won't even be adopted. It'll probably be tweaked along the way till June-ish is in our schedule.
Okay.
So it'll be online, and then also we have met with the chamber. We have a chamber representative on our team. We've also met with Main Street, have a representative of them on the team. We've done the community conversation or downtown conversations with business owners and got a lot of good feedback for our downtown area.
Who's the chamber rep?
It's
This what is his name? The sign guy. He owns a sign
Yes.
company. Liv.
Yes. Okay.
sorry. I'm
How
sorry.
ironic.
I'll think of it in a
Everyone
second.
knows him as a sign guy.
I don't know who that is. Well, awesome.
So, any more comments, let me know. Send me an email or Christine an email or log on to our website and let us know. I'll be in touch as well.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go home.
And I wanted to briefly just comment on the enforcement question, because that is some of the, when you ask why is the city commission moving forward, we have an enforcement, a lack of enforcement for signs right now, and so part of the recommendation will be a sustainable enforcement mechanism that we can produce as part of the city, because right now most of our sign code enforcement is in a queue, waiting for this process.
Thanks.
Thanks.
It's not Brian, the sign guy. It's the guy from whose wife is the glass artist.
That's the sign guy.
There's two sign guys.
What's the name of that place?
I'll write it down and send
Sign
it.
guys?
I talk to the guy all the time, and I'm just drawing a blank. I'm sorry.
He's very nice. He's
Tired.
very knowledgeable.
You mean it's
Yeah.
not Oregon City signs?
It's
the
not
sign
Oregon
guy.
City Signs. It's not the sign guy from Gladstone. It's the guy
he the
who
one that
does
did the
mobile,
signs
the
for
mobile
McLaughlin?
signs.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
I didn't know there were three.
Signs are very exciting. Although I believe in free speech, but there shouldn't be any swearing or cussing on signs. No swear words.
We can't, if it gets a little vulgar, we have a little ability to regulate content.
A little, I hope a
But
lot.
we don't.
Well, we can bring Ed Sullivan, our resident expert on free speech and sign code, if you ever want. The Oregon Constitution, as you can imagine, has a wide berth for free expression on sign code.
Oh, I can't imagine in Oregon.
That's where wit is very valuable because you can say as much as you want without being vulgar
Mhm, if you have it.
if you have it.
All right. The chamber is Ed LaPlante.
Oh, yeah,
LaPlante.
thank
There
you.
we go.
Oh,
Ed LeBlanc.
can't believe I forgot his name. That's terrible.
It's really embarrassing.
Yes.
Don't
And
tell
I'm
He's
on
very
TV.
qualified. I'm excited. We have a really good team.
We're on
we
TV?
have a lot of people with a lot of
Uh-huh.
experience.
No.
Yeah.
Streaming on the web now.
Yeah,
Oh, well,
nobody's gonna
you know,
look.
web
It's-
TV.
I mean, you'd have to be really bored to look at this.
You'd be surprised.
Oh, we've only got 3 minutes. It's a short 3-minute video. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Hey, do you need this?
No. Yes, I will need that.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah.
So the second part of tonight's meeting is an update on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and we're calling the Historic Review Board Community Conversation. We have been meeting with local, regional, and statewide stakeholder groups throughout this summer to talk about the Willamette Falls project. and get an understanding of the lens and the view and the vision of each group. And so what I'm going to do tonight is present the community conversation PowerPoint presentation. We'll show the 3-minute intro to the PGE video, which is called Willamette Falls, Where the Future Began. And then we're going to talk about kind of the vision survey, and we're going to have a little community conversation about kind of what the Historic Review Board's vision is. And what I like to call about this process, this is the dream part of the process. This is where you get to big picture vision. You get to put aside the complexities of the site and all that's going to come, and you get to put your dream hat on this summer and talk about what you want to see there. And that's going to be very valuable as we move through this process, because we want to see what excites Oregonians about this site, what kind of makes you want to be a champion, because it's going to be very important as we move through to the actual complicated master plan process and the minutia detail. We want to know what excites you and what do you hold dear about the site and what do you vision. So I'd like to start out with the video, then we'll move forward with the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll have a little conversation. So let me start with this.
So exciting.
Stories of comings and goings hang in the mist like ghosts.
Coyote and meadowlark took a rope and stretched it across the river, and they walked down the river trying to figure out when they wanted to drop the rope and create the Willamette Falls.
Stare for a while, and you sense an atmosphere of promise, of potential.
It was a focal point. It was a gathering spot. It was a place of power. And each culture that has come through got to the falls and stopped and thought about how they could best utilize what nature had created.
A fluke of geology, Willamette Falls elbows 1,500 feet across the river that shares its name and rises 4 stories high.
I really believe this is one of the great geological secrets of North America. It is the second largest waterfall in the United States. Volume-wise, the only one being bigger is Niagara Falls. People don't even realize that.
Human history has concentrated around this natural feature in unusual abundance.
Indian people have been at the Willamette Falls since time immemorial. Since thought of human people became conscious, we've been there.
Political and economic power and people's livelihoods have ebbed and flowed at the falls.
This hasn't moved since 1990, and it's still sharp enough to cut trees. God, there was how many million board feet of timber went down this river?
A state was born here, Oregon.
This was the end of the Oregon Trail. This is where people stopped and settled.
And this is where moving water revolutionized how people live. Forever.
And there's so many firsts here that have implications not only nationally but globally that changed our way of life. And it all started right in this little mess of buildings that most people just drive by on 205.
Industry rose up around the falls. To the east, in Oregon City, a paper mill. To the west, another paper mill. And one of the oldest power plants in the country. Alongside a historic canal and lock system. Altogether, perhaps 100 acres. A small, vibrant laboratory.
This was like NASA. This was like the Silicon Valley, and it really changed the world.
Okay, let me get the presentation up. So tonight we're here to give you a little brief update of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. A lot of you know a little bit about the project, but my goal tonight is to make sure everyone leaves the meeting with the same base level of information, so when we move forward with the master plan process, you'll all be able to move forward with that same base level of knowledge. When the Blue Heron Paper Company went bankrupt in February of 2011, Metro quickly contacted the city of Oregon City and indicated that this stretch of the Willamette was on their target acquisition list for their Metro open space, for their land acquisition. And we worked with Metro as a potential partner, and then later brought in the Clackamas County and the state of Oregon through State Parks and Regional Solutions Office. And we created an informal partnership to look at potentially acquiring the whole site through the bankruptcy trustee. When the property went in bankruptcy, the assets were brought through the federal bankruptcy trustee, whose name is Peter McKittrick, and he was tasked to pay off the creditors. And the assets were the ponds on the Westland side, which were sold to Wes Wastewater Environmental Services with Clackamas County, and then the property on this side, as well as the machinery. In October of 2011, NRI Global, an international firm out of Toronto that dismantles mills worldwide, purchased all of the rights to the machinery and basically non-structures, so all of the pipes, the tanks, anything of value. And they, from December 2011 till this last month, have been on the site. All 3 paper machines have been removed, as well as an extraordinary amount of pumps and pipes and other metal parts of the former paper mill. What is left on the site are all of the structures, as well as either metal tanks or that were just deemed not prudent to remove, or not really worth the time and energy for NRI. So they were basically left what they did not want to take. There are about 36 ceramic tanks on the property that, of course, NRI did not choose to move forward with because there was not a lot of metal. There were some metal tanks that had a lot of, they were more complicated, so they were left on site, but NRI cleaned out a lot. So you go into those buildings today and you'll see very open shells, whereas previously, 2 years ago, they were packed with paper machines and pipes and tanks and different types of pumps that related to paper making. The one thing that NRI needed to do with DEQ this summer, as part of the agreement when they left and a part of the sale of the Westland ponds, they needed to cut the pipe that brought the wastewater and stormwater each day from the clarifier, which I'll show you right here, right there. So every day, the effluent from the processed water and the stormwater was combined on the site, spun through the clarifier, and sent to the settling ponds in Westland. So that pipe will be cut, and that was the Westland side, was where the outfall to the Willamette River was. So they've been working with DEQ on allowing stormwater to come back onto the Willamette. And I don't know if you've read it, there was an Oregonian article a couple weeks ago about kind of an innovative system of using, they're called gully washers. They use these kind of large, really blocks of a soil and amendment, and they're going to be planting some plants in. Those are all the downspouts, and they also have some stormwater systems, water quality systems in the mill races, and they worked to basically power wash all of the floor of the machinery that they took out. So they work with DEQ on kind of a process to allow that stormwater to go back into the Willamette as this interim process. So where we are today is we have the bankruptcy trustee who still has the property for sale.
Didn't it get approved in
June of this year? Eclipse LLC out of Irvine, California, put a offer down and had a due diligence period. There was an overbid deadline of last week that anybody could overbid, and no one chose to overbid. And we're moving forward, and we're learning if Eclipse will move forward to close, or if they want to put some extra time in for extra due diligence because there's no overbid. So we're still learning more about Eclipse Development's long-term plans on the site. We have met with them, and they understand our process and are supportive, but there's, quite a ways we need to move forward. But the partnership, I explained those 4 government agencies, but has always assumed that the bankruptcy trustee or his designee or a future owner will become part of the partnership and will have a place at the table throughout this process.
So for $4.1 million, if Metro was so interested in the site, why didn't the governmental agencies come up with that money and buy it?
Good. I'll talk a little bit about the due diligence that happened last summer, and then kind of why Metro chose not to move forward with public acquisition and how we kind of came to what this process really, which is not quite a Plan B, but a little bit of a Plan B. So real quickly before I answer Vicki's
I don't
question.
want to take it out of order.
There's not a full order.
Okay.
This is the site for people. I think everyone's been on it except for John. But right here is where 99E curves, and you have the administration building, which for people who went on the site tour, that's where we stood. You walk down Main Street, and if you can imagine a traditional 40,000 square foot original plat block, you'll have 4th going this way, then you have 3rd, then you have 2nd, and you have Main Street going down. This backward 7 is the PGE Dam, which is not part of the process, not part of the site. But what is part of the site is actually this lagoon area, as well as Mill E, which is built on top of the lagoon, and the spur line that heads down to Kenema. So, of all community conversations, I can't overstate the historic significance of the site. From the video, it touched a little bit on it, but it's really layers and layers of history. You're looking at Missoula floods and geologic formations to this site being a traditional cultural place from time immemorial, to the Grand Ronde, who has they're part of the ceded lands of the Grand Ronde as well as 4 other tribes, to the John McLaughlin staking the first sawmill in 1832 on the property as part of the Hudson's Bay Company, to the beginning of kind of really industrialized West as industry came to this area and the end of the Oregon Trail. They came to the power of the falls, and you really see the birth of the state of Oregon happening in these first 4 blocks. And you really see a lot of layers. And then as we get into the 20th century, we see Hawley Pulp and Paper start their paper making company, and as time goes on into the 20th century, they take over blocks until by late 1960s they've closed the whole area and it becomes a closed campus. But before that, this was an active Main Street with multiple mixed uses. You had industry, residential, commercial all together in an active Main Street. And for just to give people a sense of where we are, this hip roof house right here is the original location of the John McLaughlin House, which was across from the Oregon City Woolen Mill, which in its time actually produced more wool and was a bigger entity than either Mission Mill down in Salem and Pendleton Woolen Mills. It's kind of lost a little bit from time, but this shows the property before the north addition of the Woolen Mill. And there we go. Let's see. Today you would see, it's a different dam, but this is generally where the dam area would, and kind of that basin and Mill E, which is in the water, would be generally here. And then, of course, the railroad would have moved through here. So to answer a little bit of Vicki's question, we have these project partners, the City of Oregon City Metro, Clackamas County, State of Oregon, and the bankruptcy trustee, their designee or a future owner as we move through this process. When Metro was looking at potentially acquiring the site last summer, they paid for $500,000 worth of work, both environmental and a due diligence document called the Site Stabilization Report. And I'll be able to show you how to get access to that on our project website. But it's a very big document. But what Metro was looking at what were the short and long-term carrying costs if there was going to be public acquisition on the site. What buildings could be adaptively reused, what buildings would have trouble, what would be kind of the right approach if this was going to be acquired. And academically, we looked at 3 scenarios. One scenario was to keep the site for 10 years as it was. The other scenario was what we call kind of a Main Street demolitions, and we talk a little bit about how the site is not flat, and it follows kind of the line of the falls and falls pretty quickly. So you're on the riverside, there are a lot of sub-basements, but we just did an academic look at if you just took it to the Main Street level, what would be the cost to demolish all the buildings. And then the third academic analysis was what would be a strategic or surgical demolition, where some of the buildings that had higher historic or adaptive reuse opportunities were kept, and the rest of the buildings were taken away as a kind of site readiness for the private development to come in. And really what the eye-opener was is all 3 options were all expensive, and they were not that much different from each other. So if anybody tells you, well, if you just do X, if you just keep all the buildings for the next 10 years and you let the market go, we can find use. Or if you just get all those buildings out of the way, we can just, private development can come in. They all were complicated, I guess, was what the answer. And at that time, last December, Metro just chose not to move forward with full site acquisition. And the trustee was not in a position where he wanted to break the site up for a potential smaller open space acquisition. And so really what came about was a realization that this site is not ready for, it has a lot of existing and perceived barriers for redevelopment. And what could we do as government agencies, knowing that all of us have our own skill sets? What can we do to start removing or reducing those barriers? And that's what we've moved forward with this visioning and master plan. The site is zoned industrial. If you've been to the site, you know that it's about as far away from a turnkey industrial site as you can get. It's very highly unlikely. It's been on sale for the last 2 years that there's not an industrial user that wants to move in. Most likely, anything that gets built there will have to have a mixed-use component to be able to pay for the cost and recoup the cost of the project. So we're moving forward with a framework visioning a master plan that's going to help get the property rezoned to a new zone, be it our mixed-use downtown zone, a hybrid mixed-use downtown zone, or a brand new Blue Heron overlay or Willamette Falls Legacy Project overlay, to be seen. But that's something we can do as a government agency, is rezone the property. We can work with ODOT to look at the transportation planning rule requirements, because that is a big hurdle for private development, is to change a zone from industrial to commercial in a regional center. And we can do that, as we can have those conversations with ODOT as part of this process. We can work through that. Metro did a phase 2 environmental analysis last year, and they're working on potentially getting helping to get a potential purchaser agreement, so that can be worked through. We found that the site was a lot cleaner than we feared, which was good news. But it still needs to be in a place where a potential purchaser gets indemnified from past, based on the recommended cleanup work, it's indemnified from past projects. The key part of this is we can do things to reduce and remove barriers, but we also don't want to so overprescribe the solution, especially if we don't know who the future property owner is, that we keep out a future property owner who may have a very good idea that would be compatible with the site. So we're always in that balance of, are we listening to the community? Are we putting through a master plan that honors what people want, but understanding the realities of the marketplace? Because if we zone and we over-regulate too much, we could be stuck with a mill site that's here for 20 years. Because we want to entice development. We don't want to scare development away. So real quickly, this summer and fall, we'll be doing community conversations, big picture visioning, understanding where the community lies on some of the issues. We get to fall and winter, we'll have concept alternatives, and as we get through late winter and early January, we'll have a final preferred plan. And the reason is this spring, we have promised the bankruptcy trustee that we will deliver a master plan and zone change application to the Planning Commission by the end of April 2014. That was the agreement for this collaborative planning agreement that we engaged with him in order to make sure that he does not abandon the property. Because if he abandons the property because he cannot sell it while we're in the middle of this process, we've added a lot of years. But if we can keep the trustee have ownership of the property, not abandon it, our goal is between now and pretty close to next spring, have a purchaser who's willing to move forward with developing. And there's the schedule's also on that third board that kind of generally talks about the 3 phases. So summer's visioning, fall and winter are concept alternatives, and the spring is the framework master plan. And it is a quick process, and we know that, and we're moving based on the timeline that we were given, and kind of moving backwards from there. We talk about 2 things, of vision strategy and the framework master plan, and I want to make sure I differentiate those. So if you speak to people, you can let them know what, it gets a little confusing. The vision strategy is these big picture goals. What does the community want to see there? And then how can we use that vision strategy as we leverage future projects in the years to come? How we leverage public-private partnerships, how we leverage maybe a potential new park or open space. But the framework master plan is really, think of it as a bubble diagram, bubbles and shaded, big picture. We're not deciding where the restaurant's going to go. I mean, but that's not what this is about. This is where the street's going to be brought back. Where's the site circulation? Where are the development blocks? We might talk. And this is Historic Review Board, so we will have a little conversation about the existing buildings, and we can get to that a little bit. But we have to have that perfect balance, which I say, and I don't know the answer in August what that is, but the balance between certainty and flexibility. And if we have a master plan that does that, is we don't overprescribe, but yet we're not so flexible that we've lost the public support for the project. So that's my eye this whole next year, is how do we keep that balance? We have 4 values that the partners have used for the last 2 years, and they've been very encompassing, and they've been very good. I think they bring about the 4 things about the site that people hold the most value. And from the Venn diagram, no one has importance over the other. They work together. I kind of see them as synergistic. When one is successful, the others are more successful. So we have public access to the falls, economic redevelopment, healthy habitat, and cultural and historic interpretation. And historic preservation is a subset of that. So I don't want to say that preservation is not a value, but it really is a sub-value, because this site has so many layers, and to be able to tell this story for all the different layers of history, preservation is a piece, but it's not using preservation as that was a value, I think you'd lose out what makes this site so incredible to so many different people. So the 2 updates from this summer, a little bit I told you about Eclipse. We'll learn more. They may move forward with closing. They may move forward with extra time. We'll find out. We also worked with the state legislature in June, and they authorized $5 million of lottery-backed bonds with an understanding that that's a matching fund. It used to be a strong 2-to-1 match, where if we came up with $10 million of private-public money, they would provide $5 million. They removed that hard match, and it became more of a match of the governor's office needs to sign off on the pro forma and the economic deal that will get the $5 million. And that $5 million is a very specific pool of money, and that is for site stabilization and infrastructure improvements. And that is the hardest money to get for helping development, so they don't sink all of their costs into things that provide them no value before they build a building. So what can we do through the public and private to get the site more ready for development? So what can we do with street infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, some initial open space? We're not building the park, but initial open space infrastructure needs. And that's what that $5 million. And that was really heartening to know that the state legislature saw this as a legacy opportunity. That was a statewide legacy opportunity. We had a lot of support, and more importantly, bipartisan support from Salem about this project. So that was a very nice kind of push just as we moved forward to start this project. Real briefly, I also want to show you, before we start, our website. I want to show you all the opportunities to utilize the website as we move forward this fall and winter, which is www.rediscoverthefalls.com.
An S in there.
Yeah.
It's right here.
Reese Discover the Falls.
.com. Oh, did I? There we go.
Worked anyway.
It's right here.
So you see our project website. Has everyone been to the project website yet? Okay. Just to give you a quick show, just there may be parts of it you haven't gotten a chance to look through, but we will have this main blog page continue to be updated as we move forward with the process. So you can always come back to this blog first page to see where we are. And we have a link to the survey. So if you have not, even though we're going to talk about survey questions tonight, I do recommend please go to do the survey. And it closes August 31st, so this weekend, but give yourself 10 minutes, sit down, and please put your thoughts in the survey. We're going to hear them tonight, but I really want you to do the survey. We also have a hard copy, and I'd be more than willing to, if you want to do a hard copy tonight, you can write your thoughts on the hard copy. We also have events as well. If you want to get involved and move forward, we'll always have our event calendar, which isn't loading on Microsoft Explorer. We have a Google Calendar. But I think and then anything under the plan, as we create documents, you'll be able to get access here. Right now, in your bags that you received on your dais, you'll see the 4 values brochures. They're available on this part of the page as a PDF, and as we get new documents this whole fall. The library, which has all documents before 2013, are available in the library, and that was that site assessment report. So I'm going to Willamette Falls 101 and clicking on library. Sorry. Not a big fan of Microsoft Explorer, so I don't know why this isn't doing it. Well, in the library, and it's the site stabilization report, and you can click on it and you can bring up, it's an Adobe report, and it's quite large, but if you want to download it, you can. We also have the site assessment forms that you can take a look at that are under Willamette Falls 101, Building Assessment Form Galleries. We took these assessment forms out of the site, the very big, large document, and if you want, you can take a look at, for example, I'm going to ping one up. So this is looking at Mill D Warehouse, and you can see a little bit about it, where it is. But down at the bottom, I want to show you this. If you go through each of the buildings, you can see a scoring rating that we did last summer. And what we had is we had KPFF structural engineers who, especially engineers that are used to historic rehab, so we made sure we got that group from KPFF. Chris DiLoretto, who's an architect who works on adaptive reuse building, he did the East Bank building right on the I-5 freeway, right on the East Bank, kind of by OMSI, as well as the Left Bank Annex by the Rose Garden. And we looked at George Kramer, who is a historic preservation consultant who works with tax credits, but also has been kind of the preservation consultant on record with PGE for the site for the last 30 years. And he wrote the initial determination of eligibility for the site 10 years ago. So we had them take each of the historic structures and rank them +3 or -3 based on their KPFF said, for structural, how hard would a structural upgrade would it be? And honestly, a 0 from KPFF is a really good score. So most of their scores are -3 to 0. And, adaptive reuse, they looked at how do the floor plates match? How big is the building? Is it really an opportunity for adaptive reuse? Does it fit today's needs for commercial redevelopment? And then George Kramer looked at the historic significance of the building itself and how it fits into the site and how it tells the story of the site. And so you can quickly kind of look at all the buildings and you can kind of see where they all start to break out. And some buildings, they're a lot easier to rehab, and some buildings are a lot harder to rehab. And I think the key thing to take away from this is a really good academic exercise to understand the structures on the site. But my big worry is, as we move forward, we cannot overprescribe our solution because we don't have the business pro forma or the proposed redevelopment. And we may think that building A meets all these, it ranks the best, so therefore we should save this. But there may be another building that's not on our radar that someone comes in and says, well, this meets, my needs, and I have a checkbook ready to do it. If we have to make sure we write this this master plan with an understanding that markets change and buildings change. So we don't have the correct answer, but we can start with what we do know, which is these kind of academic answers of what buildings make more sense to adaptively reuse or historic rehab and what makes less sense, and kind of start with what we know. And then hopefully, in a perfect world, we would have a developer coming in this year that has an understanding. But if we get to the point of next spring and we still don't have somebody willing to purchase the property, it may change a little bit about kind of exactly what we're requiring and how we're triggering things, and if it's going to be a carrot approach or if it's a stick approach. There's lots of different tools in the toolbox, and I don't have the answer in August, and we're actively looking at some of the options of how we are able to honor what the community has said is a value, which is adaptive reuse and authenticity and sense of place, with a market that is not as excited about rehabbing a lot of these buildings. So how do we meet in the middle, and knowing that we will be providing public-private partnership to get there, but we also worry, it's the worst case scenario is, have we overprescribed and we're going to sit here for 15 years and kind of be a little bit of a Centennial Mills issue of, we can't, because I think that's people's real worry. So I don't have the answer for you tonight, but please, if you do, as we move forward and people talk about this building or that building, please go on and you can learn more about each of the buildings and kind of their pluses and minuses and kind of how some of them. So as you see some plan approaches in the fall, you'll be able to, and I'll come back with them, but you'll be able to kind of see why we came up with some ideas. Let me get out. The other thing that's really fun, and I really recommend if you are an active Facebook user, we do post the historic photo of the day on our Facebook page. We have historic photos, and this one is a Mark Gamba photo who took site photos. But if you move forward every day, Monday through Friday, we have historic photos of the day. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of look through, and we'll be posting these throughout the process. We've been working with Clackamas County Historical Society, and they've scanned all the Blue Heron photo collections, and you'll be kind of seeing them. And they're actually, it's a great education tool, and you can learn a lot about the site if you just kind of look at the photo of the day for the next 4 or 5 months. So I do encourage you to like us on our Facebook page or come back to the site as much as you can and maybe drink your morning coffee while you look at the new photo of the day. We are going to be at the Willamette Falls Festival, October 5th and 6th. We also are going to be having an open house that following week, I believe on the 8th. We are going to be meeting with the former Blue Heron employees on October 24th at the Tumwater Room for kind of a reunion and a community conversation and an oral history project with them. So we have a lot of people we're going to be working with this fall. We've met, I'd say we've probably have already had between Clackamas County, Oregon City, and Metro, we've probably met with over 25 to 30 groups and had community conversations with them this summer. We sent out the vision survey to opt in this summer, and we had 1,800 responses. We have a couple hundred responses on our website, as well as our community conversation responses, and we're about to synthesize that after it closes on the 31st. And we'll start to see. The other thing we have is we have a partners group, which is the 2 elected officials from each of the government entities, as well as the trustee and a key executive staff, and they're going to be meeting 4 times this year to work on providing leadership and guidance, and more importantly, how do we build champions for this site as we move forward on some of the more public processes and go back and look for lobbying. So there's 2 documents that will be created this next spring. It'll be the quasi-judicial land use application, what you think of as a master plan and zone change, and then maybe a developer's agreement if we have one, your traditional land use process. But we'll also have what we call a vision strategy report and an economic strategy report, which is a little more of a pretty book. It's still going to be the lobbying document. This is going to be the document we use to apply for grants, and that will be moving forward to all 4 of the government. I'm not sure how the state of Oregon is going to do it, but Metro, Clackamas County, and Oregon City will be reviewing it and adopting it by resolution. So that's kind of the big picture. So on your end, you still have your dream hat on. What I'd like to do tonight is to go through a little bit of this vision survey, and I want to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to get a pen. I'll be right back.
I'll be dead in the year 2035. Truly.
So it's 2035. What do you want to see on the site? What's your dream if you were to visit the site?
John has no opinion. He already said he's going to be dead.
He's going to what?
Otherwise,
dead.
Otherwise occupied.
I will be.
It's 2035. What would you like your children to see on the site? So this is this is really your time to.
Yeah, I would like to
use
see an active streetscape. People down there enjoying businesses, housing. I think mixed use is going to be what brings that together. Mm-hmm. Some density that's significantly more than what our current downtown sees. I see it as a very positive extension of our current Main Street that will bleed some more momentum into the rest of Main Street. I think you will see the rest of Main Street and change in a lot of ways by 2035 if this project moves forward.
I'd like to see a really beautiful park as part of it, with access to the river and to the falls. And I'd like to see the history preserved and be available for people to learn about and be part of the entire development.
Yeah.
Remember? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Remember when we were taking the tour and you showed us the overlay of the streets? I would like to see that come back, maybe not in full, but at least in part, to show kind of how the layout was in those days, and then also have several museums. And I say several because you want it kind of historically appropriate. Each museum is historically appropriate for the time that it's talking about, because it's such a big, long history that you couldn't really get it all in one building. And maybe some amphitheater and some, something that utilizes the water as a backdrop.
Yeah. A pedestrian connection from Clackamas Park to whatever park is at this site, I think is really important. It'd make a nice bookends to the city.
You know what I think about this site, and it's on a smaller scale, but in Bend, there's the old mill district,
Mm-hmm.
you know where REI is and the towers. I mean, there's some commercial, but it's close to the river. You can access the river there, and it's still industrial. I think about that for this site, but this is a much bigger scale. far more mixed use with residential.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is, will it take till 2035 to make it happen?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's disappointing.
I mean, I think using the term 2035 is to let people know that it's not 2018. It's not 2016.
It's not going to
You
happen
know.
right away.
It's a good so the public understands that, there's a lot of, there's 500,000 square feet of buildings right now. Some may be rehabbed, some may not. Let's go park, hopefully will be built. That takes a little bit of time.
And what we are used to is that's come around is like the Bridgeport thing or the Old Mill thing. That's what we think of as mixed use today, with office space and walking, pedestrian stuff, and that's what that's going to be, but with an industrial bent to it. That's like
Those are lifestyle centers.
okay, but it's what we're used to now, right?
Yeah.
I like them.
So without putting any of you on the spot, I know and you may not have an answer now, so please tell me I don't have an answer now, but how have you thought about honoring the history of the site and the value of historic preservation, and what kind of, what you would love to see on the site, but what kind of is as kind of a sacred to you of, we need X, or this needs to make sure this needs to happen. And it's kind of the big question of it's not going to come in front of the Historic Review Board because there's no historically designated structures now on the site. But I do know that your background and your lens and your kind of knowledge of preservation in Oregon City is valued by our community. So I know that might be a time when they do want the Historic Review Board's overall direction and opinion, which doesn't have to be tonight. But if there's anything that you've kind of already been chewing on that you want to get out there, then you can definitely do that tonight.
Yeah. I don't think a museum makes any sense. Oregon City has a lot of them. It'd be cool to see something like OMSI. It would be a great filler for some of those huge voids of buildings. But it's not going to happen. So I think monuments as you walk down Main Street, or experiences, I guess would be the best way to put that. Because that's not to say that is a piece of granite that sticks up or a sign, but something that is an experience as you're walking through that is a series, I think makes a lot of sense. And something that's more literal than the bent pieces of metal that we have on 99E right now. I think that's too abstract. So something that does bring out that history. And even if we have buildings that go away, taking some thought into those of, are there elements or pieces that can be pulled out of it? Like the one next to the administrative building, I forget what it's called.
Water treatment plant?
Yes. It's got a very nice elevator in there, for instance. It's not really usable today, but you could pull that out and stick it inside of something bigger, rehab it a little bit. And I think that would, elements like that, looking for opportunities, would bring this sense of what was there back. And we've talked about the woolen mill, that area. Everyone sees great potential there. And any machinery that is still there that could be used as an interpretive area, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Most all of it is gone from the paper company, but I'm sure as excavation happens or other things happen, there are going to be things that are found. And
I
go ahead.
agree with you completely, and I really like the way you phrased that. I mean, a museum would be okay, but I think having
An interpretive area.
Experiences
and monuments is for every man to incorporate in their life and not have to go, oh, I'm going to the museum today, but just make it part of your existence when you're down there. It's really important. Also, when we went on the tour there, I don't remember the name of the building, but we were inside some stone walls.
That was the foundation of the Oregon City Woolen Mill.
The basalt walls.
I would love to see that preserved and utilized in some way because it was really brings you back and makes you feel like you're going back in history.
I know that this is probably never going to happen, but the burning thing about what I'm thinking of is the fact that PGE can shut those falls off whenever they feel like it. And in August, when tourist season is high and we're trying to get, some interpretive going, because I think the biggest, most important thing about those falls is the tribes that use them for fishing. And if you could have some maybe life-size sculptures that are in the falls as the falls are going, of them actually fishing and they silhouette against the sunset, I think that would be really cool. And then, make that part of the interpretive. But if PGE is going to shut the water off whenever they feel like it, it's really kind of a big deal.
Can I say one thing about that? I was under the same impression that PGE regulated the water based on how much power they needed. And when Carlotta Collette came to give a talk to the chamber one day, I asked that question, and Annette Madsen from PGE was there, and she gave a wonderful explanation of what they do and why they do it. And they don't turn off the power, turn off the falls.
No, they divert
to
it.
regulate power. It has to
For
do
fish
with
passage.
with how high the water level is and a lot of environmental concerns. And so from at least from her explanation, it seemed to me like they had really legitimate reasons for doing that, although I don't like it.
Yeah.
I know this is absolutely. They're FERC licensed through to 2035. The flashboards that go up in the summer are there for fish passage, but it also relates to the power. But for the most part, it is related because the water level is getting lower. So it's related to their FERC requirement for fish passage. It's all interrelated. But,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely not part of this process. But there's another round of FERC licensing.
Yeah. The Canby Ferry can't operate also as if that's not retained.
Yeah.
So, other thoughts? We can talk a little more about the questions, but I think I'm just, if there's historic preservation or just general historic and cultural interpretation as that value, you are the board. This is, in the visioning sense, this is your chance tonight to kind of provide your lens to our consultant team, Walker Macy, who are taking all of these. They're taking the opt-in, but then all of these, I'll be filling out a debrief form for each of the community conversations I go to and letting them know kind of what are the visions, the concerns, the passion that this board has for the site. So they kind of understand where you're coming from as they move forward for their alternative. So this kind of is your chance tonight, in some ways, to be elevated above sitting at your computer typing in a survey, which is great, so please do.
So the buildings that are currently there are bookended by two elements that the buildings will never be able to be built that close to again. You can never build on the retaining wall for the railroad tracks, and you can never build over or on the river. And so I hope that as the master plan is put together, it takes in consideration some, I don't know if it's an incentive or if it's an allowance for additional area or a transfer of density to retain some of those buildings, because you want to talk about access to the falls or access to the river. I think it's a huge benefit to be that close and experience. It rains most of the time in Oregon, so though I would love to see some huge buildings up, there's something really nice about like being on that edge within a conditioned space. And so I see that as a viable reason to keep some of the buildings that you wouldn't otherwise keep, and making provisions for that. I think it's a way of encouraging without mandating. And it can make a decision easier to say, I can transfer the density over here without going through a cumbersome process. And I think that more than anything, that's really the thing. Because right now we're looking at it all as one property. And it may not be. It may get sold by blocks. And so maybe it's within this overlay district that density can be transferred with a simple letter. or something like that, so that such and such building can be kept and reused, and they can use that density somewhere else.
Has any archaeological survey been done on the property?
No, but we have brought out Dennis Griffin with the State Historic Preservation Office. He's the archaeologist, and we brought Doug Wilson out with the National Park Service. Knowing that there's not a lot of native soil on the site, not only is a lot basalt, but then most of the what we call the railroad side of Main Street has been very excavated over time. There might be some historic archaeology. But what they looked at, they had some questions about as we move forward, and we have an archaeologist on our consultant team that's going to be doing a bit of a white paper. But at this time, knowing that we have, that not a lot of native soil and a lot of highly excavated, the white paper is going to talk a little bit about, as you move forward, these are the things we should be requiring and moving forward. But they didn't say anything of, this right here has high opportunity for archaeological, and this has very low opportunity. It's not as clear as that.
Yeah.
And so, but we have had those initial discussions, and then I think we made sure to scope in a little bit of a white paper as we move forward.
I guess I'd be interested in ensuring that people whoever does the work on the site is sensitive to finding things. That they just don't push it away and not pay attention to what might be there.
Right, and one thing we can do is with this overlay, we could require, if there's native soil, you could require the days that are out to have an archaeological monitoring. You just have to be, what's that kind of, we talk about the certainty, flexibility. When we write that in, we just have to be very specific that you are budgeting in this understanding for these days, and that's just the cost of doing business. And once it's found, it can be recorded and documented, very quickly. But those are absolutely within our framework to look at. But look, when we had that archaeological site tour with them last year, nothing came out other than, wow, there's not a lot of soil.
The natives, however, were really very inventive about using rock as well. So I think you want to pay attention.
And we met with the Grand Ronde Tribal Council 2 weeks ago. Mayor Neely and Commissioner Pauly and Commissioner Collette from Metro, as well as some staff, went down to Grand Ronde and had a really nice conversation with them. And then we actually are taking them on a tour in a couple weeks. And we have reached out to the 4 other tribes as well. So we're trying to bring them along in this process.
So I think the basements are kind of blah. The sub basements are really interesting and have a lot of. I think there's some value there, not economically, but I think there's some historic value.
You're walking back in time.
Yeah, just crazy and complicated, and just those basalt foundations are very cool. That being said, I think from the conversations that I've heard, everyone's thinking from Main Street up, and I think that's a fairly limited view because the ground is sloughing away there and going down to the river. There's an opportunity for underground parking, and being that the cost of scraping everything and starting over is similar to trying to work around everything, you have to take into account that someone may want to go deep and start over and do underground parking, considering that it is a restrained site. It's easy to put it up against the railroad side, but I just feel the need to throw that out there.
So the rest of this, we won't go through the rest of the vision survey tonight, but some of it talks about recreation. But one of the last questions I like to end with is the opposite. In the future, what do you not want on the site? What would make you very disappointed in 2035 if this happened?
An Indian casino.
They don't own the property.
Big box retailers.
Big box retailers, yeah. Circus rides.
Walmart. I guess that falls under big box retailers.
So give me more. So we've definitely heard, from the community that they, strip commercial is not the high on people's lists. But what other things would kind of, maybe just go, yeah, That's unfortunate if that happened. Or what would make you feel that it didn't live up to its potential? Like, what would be a compromise you would be kind of sad?
Some big sculpture like a wagon wheel, or or a prairie schooner or something like that.
Bars.
Yeah, bars. No bars.
Too many bars in Oregon
Unless they were
City.
part of a big
Oh,
restaurant.
there's going to be bars on it.
Taverns.
So a little recreation of an element or something. So for instance, the Olson Drug redo that is essentially a copy of the church house. Is that? Yeah. It fits the guidelines, but I think it's
Tacky.
yeah, it's not great, and so I would hate to see that. Also, Seattle's going through some interesting things right now, where they put in incentives to reuse old buildings, and some developers who are very into historic preservation have deemed facade jobs, whereas you strip everything out except for the front facade, and then you manage to build more, which makes a lot of sense economically, but it wasn't quite what it's for. It looks really strange. So,
Well, here's a question: if that was the only option to save a building, how would you view a facadism?
I don't know if I think of that as saving a building.
I mean, this is more of a
Sounds better
question.
than none, I guess.
Yes.
If that's all that was there.
The question that's been out there, so I'm just curious what your take on that is. Because I'm kind of in.
Say the question again.
Well, if keeping a facade and basically building a new building inside, but keeping the facade up, and a good example is the Whole Foods building next to the brewery blocks on Burnside. It was an old Chevrolet dealership, but that's a perfect example of facadism. But I guess the question is of how do you view that in the context of this process? To you, is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, a lamentable third option? Is it better than nothing? Is it worse? You'd rather just have quality new construction? I mean, I'm just curious what your general view of that, because
I have qualms about doing that because a lot of those buildings in those days they were weathered, they were boring, they were plain, and even though the structures are kind of okay, but I would like to see them painted a good color, or become some kind of inviting, be kind of inviting in some way.
I like the facade idea. Where I've seen it in other cities, especially if you have a more grand type facade, it's really cool. And I really like a juxtaposition of the old and the new, and Barcelona is like a great example of that. I mean, the architecture there is pretty amazing, and they have a mixture of old and new, and I think it sets off and highlights the old really well when you do that.
It's just that the old here is so...
it's the existing condition.
And perhaps if something like that happens, if it comes before the Planning Commission or the HRB, then that can be evaluated at that point in time. It's really hard to regulate, and I get that. This is the point that I'm making. I think it's ineffective to write it in a code to say
I don't think
you can regulate that effectively.
I think
I was just throwing out something that's already been kind of
I've seen great examples and really poor examples.
Yeah, I think you'd know it when you see it. I mean, it's really hard to write something on a piece of paper that'll help anybody do it right, but it's right when you see it.
Right. Yeah, ideas have to flow in, and people have to say yes and no.
Going back to dreaming, this is a radical dream, but the McLaughlin House was once down there, wasn't it? I mean, what about taking it back down there? Where was the Ermitinger House originally?
Where the Elks building is.
We have some historic resources, and it would be super, super cool if we could move them back where they were.
That would be cool. That was in one of your photos that you had. It showed the house there, and that's
Of course, this time we probably won't use old growth logs and a
Army
winch,
old
but Well, this is a really good conversation. This is not the first and only time. I'll come back as we move forward with plan alternatives, but I want to keep this board involved as much as possible. You have a lot of good background and lens and understanding kind of the value of historic buildings, but also the reality of rehabbing historic buildings and the reality of development. And so I think it'll be a good check as we move forward. And the opposing forces that you see and all their comments regarding this one value, because we definitely have what I've heard this summer is people wanting to create an authentic place, and they like keeping buildings. How do we go from that dream to an actual master plan and code and conditions that can get us there, knowing the constraints of the market and not wanting to overregulate something? So, I mean, that is, to me, this is one of the hardest parts of this process this year, that and working with getting the zone change and trying to understand our proportional responsibilities with ODOT. To me, I think are the two hardest parts of this plan, and so I don't have the answer yet. But I want to bring it back to the board as much as possible.
Oh, one other comment. Traffic. A traffic engineer is going to have a great time dealing with 99E/Main Street, that intersection. And I think if you just let an engineer run with that, it's not going to be pedestrian friendly. I really don't. So a lot of thought has to be dealt with that. I would hate to see that be an impenetrable or uncrossable area, because then you have a district rather than a continuation of downtown.
Well, and Main Street, Oregon City, Main Street businesses, planning staff, citizens, they want this connected to Main Street. And to me, the only way you can adequately do that is to have a very easy pedestrian crossing experience at grade. If you have a pedestrian bridge, you've basically stopped people from going to the other side. You really have.
Totally true.
You need to have active retail experiences on either side of 99E to bring people over. They have to have a reason to cross. If they're in Main Street, they have a reason to cross. And you have to activate that. It's really actually easy to cross Main Street under 99E. It's not very long. So my goal is, as a planner, is to make sure that as we go through this process, we do as much as we can to continue to integrate Main Street back in every way, shape, or form, in a way that is supporting good urban design. Because I think that is what's going to make that connection.
Interesting.
So that's all I had.
Well, stay involved. Like us on Facebook. Fill out the vision survey by August 31st this weekend. So Saturday night. Get on your computer by Saturday night and fill out. It's 10 minutes.
31st.
Guarantee that's going to happen.
No, not, but by the 31st. Go sit down tomorrow when you're drinking your coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
Sit down and fill us out.
Take
10
your
minutes.
tablet or laptop and sit down and do it.
Sit down and do it. And just stay involved as we move forward, and I'll bring this back at the next stage. So I appreciate it. We have Sal in the back, so we can break for dinner.
Christina, thanks.
Thank you,
Yes.
Christina.
It's your turn again.
Oh,
Are we adjourned?
are we adjourned?
We're adjourned. That's the end.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Let me